So here we go into part 3 of the Wake Up series, guys. So in the first video, you heard me talk a lot about CERN and the type of shit they've been up to. In the second video, you heard me touch a lot on extraterrestrials and really the kind of research that I do into it. This video is basically going to be a continuation of my research into the extraterrestrial and UFO encounters and sightings, as far as that portion of conspiracy, as well as the religious group that I mentioned in the second video that I believe is really pulling the strings behind the entire world's government, and how I believe they are doing it. But before I get into that, so in the second video, you heard me mention a book, a PDF file called The Blue Planet Project. And I mentioned one of the chapters in that book being on the invisible government. So, a couple other chapters I want to touch on real quick before I get into the whole, religious group shit and stuff like that. Now, before I go any further, I can already hear a bunch of you guys saying a religious group is pulling the strings behind the world government. Are you crazy? It's not as crazy as it seems once you start putting basically two and two together. So some of the other chapters in the Blue Planet Project include facts about aliens on Earth. Now, there are a few code names that go along with these chapters. I don't really know how to pronounce a lot of these codes. But anyway, facts about aliens on Earth, and then it goes into saying code omnidata, or something along that line. And that chapter is basically about, facts about aliens on Earth, main important UFO crashes and ultra-secret cover-ups, extraterrestrial classifications, and alien presence on Earth. Essentially, what this book is meant to do, what this book has in it, it was allegedly said that this book had a description for over 160 different alien species that are currently visiting Earth or inhabiting Earth. I did take a look into it. To the best of my knowledge, it really only showcases 10. Some of those we are very familiar with, others we are not. I will be getting into those a little bit later. Other chapters in this book are cattle mutilations, the Enterian connection, I believe is how that's pronounced, the crop circle phenomenon, which that leads into the religious group that I'll be talking about here in a little bit as well. One of the bases that I touched on in the last video being the Dulce base. Then it goes into some kinds of alien life forms we know about. There is a book. I don't know where to find it, but I know you can find a YouTube video that tells you this as well. But there's a book called the Alien Encyclopedia. I am going to try to find a link to that video on YouTube so that I can include it in every video past this one as well. But like I said in the last video, there will be a link to the Blue Planet Project PDF file with every video, even though I didn't say that in part 1. But anyway, this book is called the Alien Encyclopedia, and it lists and describes over 75 different alien species. I have a feeling I'll be watching this video over again. Because I swear I just saw something move from around my bathroom door. So real quick, before I go any further, you are not welcome here. Get the fuck out of my apartment. So anyway, this book, and like I said, there's a video for it as well, lists over 75 different alien species. It lists species that we already know about, and it lists a few species that even I didn't know about at first. And just stuff like that. One of the species it lists, it was one of the first species it lists, is a species called the Anunnaki. Initially, what the Anunnaki are, they're a species of alien that have always coexisted with mankind. They've always been there to lend us a helping hand. It is actually theorized, mind you, that the Anunnaki return to Earth every 3,600 years to basically, I guess you can say, kind of pass judgment on how far man has come. Whether that part of it is true or not, I don't know. But it's also theorized that the Anunnaki helped the ancient Egyptians build the pyramids. Which, when you stop to think about it, it took the ancient Egyptians 20 years, only 20 years, to build the pyramids. It has been calculated by scientists that in order for the ancient Egyptians to have been able to build these structures in 20 years, keep in mind, these are multi-ton stone blocks that they hauled from 500 miles. 500 miles? It's either 500 or 50 miles. I might have my numbers mixed up a little bit there. Either way, basically they had to carve and place with pinpoint accuracy these multi-ton blocks every 2.5 minutes in order to have completed them in 20 years. To the best of modern knowledge, the ancient Egyptians didn't really have stuff like cranes. There was no way of moving more than one brick at a time by means of, like, say, something like a dump truck or something like that. Let alone just trying to get these bricks carved and put into place with pinpoint accuracy. It's nearly impossible to do that without some of the tools we have today. And even with some of the equipment we have today, it's still a very hard task to do. But anyway, it is theorized that the Anunnaki helped the ancient Egyptians create the Great Pyramids. There have been a couple of different stories floating around, however, about where the Anunnaki live. Some extraterrestrial and ufologists theorize that the Anunnaki, that some of them live in Atlantis. Okay, it doesn't sound so far-fetched. But along with that, and I forget which culture it was that named this planet, but it's a planet we've come to know now as either Planet X or Nibiru. If I remember correctly, it's a planet that exists beyond Venus. I'm almost certain it's Venus. I might be wrong on that planet. But either way, it is said that Nibiru is the home of the Anunnaki. Again, whether this is true or not, whether Nibiru or Planet X actually exists, we don't know. because according to the ancient beliefs of this particular culture, Nibiru was quote unquote a mythical planet. Again, whether this is true or not, we don't know. Um, Now, we've all had those scares over the years of Planet X, colliding with our planet, and everyone freaks out about it. One thing I want to touch on real quick: when this planet ends, not if, but when this planet ends, we're not going to know about it, and there's going to be nothing we can do about it. So there's no sense in freaking out over it. But like the brainwashed sheep, over 90% of this planet is, you're going to feed into it. You're going to panic. You're going to go out and buy shit you don't need. It is what it is. So getting back into the Blue Planet Project, just to kind of wrap up with a couple other chapters. As a matter of fact, it's going to be the last few chapters of the book. There's a chapter on alien technology. There's also a chapter in here, U.S. government secret technology, alien abductions, and the last chapter is the practice of manipulation of the mind, which is another thing that the government has been up to lately, in the form of HARP. But that's kind of getting outside of the realm of my expertise. I know a little bit about HARP. I know about the massive genocide that was caused in Canada due to HARP. And I know that HARP allegedly controls the weather. But aside from that, I don't know too much more about HARP. I know what some of my colleagues and friends in the conspiracy theory community tell me. So anyway, that is a rough rundown of the different chapters that you can find in the Blue Planet Project PDF file, which again, like I said in the last video, is going to be a link in every video that's part of this series. So, now with that out of the way, to get into the religious group, the secretive religious group that I believe, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in the conspiracy community that believes this, but the religious group that I believe is the government behind the government, the shadow government, the puppet master, if you will, is a group called the Rosicrucians. This is an off-branch, allegedly an off-branch of the Christian religion. It's apparently a group of Christians that accepted science and logical thinking. It is theorized that a member of the Rosicrucians, if I remember correctly, his name was RS or RC Christian or something like that, is allegedly the mastermind behind a very well-known United States monument in Georgia called the Georgia Guidestones. What's very interesting about these stones, this monolith, is it's almost like something out of the Bible where it's like a list of commandments. Basically, it's there to kind of guide people into how mankind could coexist side by side with nature at an even balance, basically. There's a couple of things that's very interesting about this monolith. One, is that it sits on what's known as an Arcadian ley line, which is a network of ley lines across the planet that actually crisscross. The particular ley line, sorry, the particular ley line that the guide stones rest on, I forget the name of it exactly, but it is considered to be the most powerful ley line on the planet because of all of the blood and just overall gore that the ley line has seen over the years, in the form of, say, the Confederate War, the war between the North and the South, however you want to say that. And the other thing that's very interesting, but also very chilling about this particular ley line, and yes, my phone is ringing again, so we're going to be wrapping this up right after this. I'm sorry, about this particular monument, is one of the statements, one of the quote-unquote commandments on this monolith. And it states, and I quote, that in order for man and nature to have basically a very well-balanced life, to be able to coexist side by side evenly, the world population cannot exceed over 500 million. Cannot exceed it. Meaning that the perfect balance on this planet for man and nature to coexist is for the human race to be either at or under 500 million. This is why and the reason that is so interesting is the fact that basically it's stating that, now keep in mind, the planet is already at around 8 billion people when it comes down to population. And it is theorized that the maximum amount of humans that can reside on this planet is 10 billion. But right now we sit at 8 billion. At 8 billion. So the fascinating yet worrisome fact about that particular commandment on the guide stones is that in order for that to become a reality, 7.5 billion people have to be eradicated from the face of the earth. Now again, I don't know about you, but when I first heard that, it sent a chill up my spine. Because we're talking about more than 90% of this planet's population wiped out like that. That's the only way, according to these guide stones, that man and nature could coexist on even terms. That being said, stay tuned for part 4. As you guys heard, my phone was ringing a couple times. My girlfriend is trying to call me again. So I'm going to jump off here real quick, talk to her about whatever the fuck it is she wants to talk about. And then I'll be back with part 4. So stay tuned, guys.
Turn around. A drop of blood on the ground. No turning back, now it's done.